This is a very important visit for President Obama for several reasons. First, there has been a general belief in India that the US-India relationship has been losing its ardor and intensity. And this visit provides the President with the opportunity to set right that impression. I think that's the first important objective that the visit has. The second is that the President himself, I think, has very ambitious goals for what he wants from India. He wants a global partnership. That concept, however, has not been clearly defined. And the visit is going to provide him with the opportunity to define what a global partnership actually means. The third element is that the President believes that India has an important role to play in the area of trade, in the area of economics. And this has particular resonance given the economic crisis that currently engulfs the United States. And so I think you can look to the visit to see a variety of commercial deals that are closed. The Indians will want to close on those deals to show that they actually support the United States in tangible ways. And the President will want to close on those deals because he wants to be able to show his constituencies back in the United States that the relationship with India is paying off in very tangible terms. So there's a broad range, everything from geopolitics at the highest level to the bilateral relationship to issues relating to money. There is a very wide-ranging agenda for the visit. In fact, I fear that the agenda can be so wide-ranging that the visit could actually even lose focus. But let me identify some key areas that matter to both sides. The first is diplomatic consultation, which is critical because the United States is deeply involved, as you know, in Afghanistan and Pakistan. These are areas that matter very much to India. There is a complication, shall we say, in US-China relations at the moment having to do with currency and the nature of the global economic system. This is an issue that is also very important to India because depending on how that currency question is resolved, India could see a major inflow of foreign investment which the economy may be unable to handle. So these are two big areas which matter to the Indians. And so diplomatic consultation is going to be very high on the agenda. The second broad area is the area of trade. And trade involves increasing market access to both sides. The US getting greater access to the Indian market in retail, in dairy products. The Indians getting greater access to the United States with respect to portfolio investment, with respect to branch banking. So there's a whole range of economic issues that are on the agenda. The third area would be closing up all the uncertainties related to India's nuclear liability legislation, satisfying the United States that there is in fact a level playing field for American companies. This would be a third important area. The fourth is defense and space cooperation. There is a wide agenda here that involves both sides. There is an agreement that has been pending called the Civilian Space Launch Agreement, which has been pending since 2004, which both sides are hoping to close on. There is a great deal of things to be still done in the area of defense cooperation, beyond just weapon sales. Exercises, a very ambitious agenda of how the two countries can actually work together. There are foundational agreements that the United States hopes India will sign. Then going on, there are areas relating to energy, science and technology, education, public health. All these are going to be on the table. And so when one looks at it, there's really a soup to nuts agenda that will occupy both sides. And the challenge will be actually drilling down on 2 or 3 key areas that will help define the visit, as opposed to dealing with all these and then being lost in a morass of multiple issues. There is a theme that already seems to be surfacing, and the theme that is surfacing is that India is part of the vibrant Asia-Pacific region, and we see it as an important component in maintaining a favorable balance of power in Asia. Now, this administration is very shy about using the term balance of power, but everyone understands what exactly we mean. And I think what they will do is use the fact that the president is going to Delhi first, or going to India first, and then going to Indonesia, South Korea, and Japan, to showcase the argument that India is in fact an American partner in a larger Asia-Pacific region, and not just simply in the South Asian region. So I think that is going to become very clearly a very important talking point for the trip. It's a very curious moment, actually, in the bilateral relationship at this point. At the private level, I think US-Indian relations are thriving. If you look at the intensity with which the two societies are engaged, whether that be in education, whether that be in science and technology, whether that be in business, or whether that be in the arts, there is a profound transformation that has taken place compared to where we were, say, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. But at the official level, I think the transformation has flagged, and it has by no means come to a stop. I don't think that is true, but it has certainly flagged. And I think the reasons for that are actually quite complex, and they exist on both sides. There are many in the US who, blame the Obama administration for, in a sense, dropping the ball. I think that's a tad uncharitable. I think the Obama administration is deeply distracted, and it's distracted by the challenges of managing the crises that surround it, whether those be economic or whether those be geopolitical. And to that degree, it's not paid the attention to India that, for example, the Bush administration paid. I think that much is obvious. But I don't think they've dropped the ball. And I think the president personally is very keen to sustain this relationship, because as he has said both privately and publicly, this is one of the great things he inherited from his predecessor, and he is not likely to lose it on his term. But there are difficulties in India as well, and this is something that people have not focused on. The Indian government, particularly the Singh government in the second term, is very inward looking, and it's inward looking partly because they're suffering from indigestion because of all the big initiatives that they launched in the bilateral relationship in the first term. And they're still trying to digest those in the aftermath of those big decisions. So that's part of it. The other part is simply domestic politics is dominating their attention today, because they're thinking of the next election. And the next election, is bringing them face to face with the challenge of how do you bring the 400 or 500 million Indians who have not profited from economic growth thus far into the national economic success. And because that has become the focus, the government has been looking more at issues of equity rather than issues of growth, looking more at domestic politics rather than foreign policy. And between these two bookends, India has become inward-looking, and so the attention that it might have otherwise paid to the bilateral relationship has also dropped. So there is enough at both ends to suggest that there has been a certain flagging in the relationship. Now, the visit, I think, provides a great opportunity to rev this up, to jumpstart it. And I think both sides are really looking forward to that. At one level, it is very important. At another level, less so. It's very important when Washington thinks about the world in the out years. So when the president is thinking about what kind of environment does he want to leave the United States in when he demits office, from that perspective, India becomes very important. And he has said this publicly because he thinks of India as being a key partner for those larger objectives that the United States seeks to achieve, along with the European community, along with Asia's principal alliance partners, Japan and South Korea, along with probably America's principal competitor, China. India is in that league now, and so he sees that as being very important. But at another level, India has, in a sense, dropped in salience, and that is because the president is so focused on firefighting. He is focused on trying to resuscitate the American economy, and India plays a very marginal role in that struggle. He is focused very much on trying to extricate the United States from the conflict in Afghanistan. India is important there, but our policy has moved in a direction that does not make India critical. And yet, you cannot afford to lose India, because India could be a very important part of the problem if you don't handle it right. And so I think the challenge for the Obama administration is trying to figure out how to raise India's salience in the challenges that it confronts in the here and now. And that is Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China. Because everyone agrees that India becomes very important when you look at the out years and when you look at the larger challenges in the Asia Pacific. India is a counterweight to China, whether we play it as a counterweight or not. And it's a counterweight to China simply because it is located next to China. It's one of the two countries in the Asian continent which is growing at very dynamic rates. It is going to be the third or the fourth largest economy in the world in another 20 years. And so whether we want it to be or not, India sees its own interests as requiring it to maintain a certain set of capabilities vis-a-vis China. So there is going to be a certain rivalry that exists between India and China, irrespective of what the United States does. Now, the challenge for the US is how we position ourselves, given that the Sino-Indian relationship is going to be one of the pivotal relationships in Asia. And I have consistently argued that given that the US is going to face a challenge from China, independent of whatever happens in the Sino-Indian relationship, it is in our interest to develop a tacit coordination with India, because we do have a common challenge. And this doesn't mean a containment strategy, because I think the realities of economic interdependence do not allow for containment. But it does mean developing essentially a stable balance of power, where the United States ends up having enough friends and allies on China's periphery that very fact acts as a restraint mechanism on China's propensity to exploit its power. And to the degree that we think of the US-India relationship in that sense, which is it provides a set of objective constraints on China's willingness to abuse its power, I think that is an outcome that satisfies the interests of all concerned. We have done less well than we should. And the reason for that is because our policies, particularly in the Afghanistan-Pakistan area, have hinged on Pakistan as the fulcrum. And because they've hinged on Pakistan as the fulcrum, we have actually gone out of our way to make certain that we do not excessively have Indian entanglements. And the reason we've done that is because we don't want to unnerve our Pakistani partners that a too deep relationship with India might end up, putting them at a disadvantage. Now, unfortunately, this strategy is coming to the limits of its success, because we have now begun to realize, after 8 years in Afghanistan, that Pakistan is a very ambivalent partner of the United States, that while it cooperates with the US in certain counterterrorism objectives, it also opposes us with respect to other counterterrorism objectives. And so I think the US is now at a point where it is looking for ways to integrate Indian interests more actively in its management of the challenges in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I think that is not only to the good, it is also necessary, because India has, substantial geopolitical throw weight. And an India that is left out of the solution automatically becomes part of the problem. And so if you don't want to get there, then you want to start engaging India now, particularly when you are thinking actively in terms of an exit. At this juncture, India becomes all the more important because US goals and Indian goals are actually identical with respect to Afghanistan. And when you think about it, also identical with respect to Pakistan. Unfortunately, we have done better than people think, but I don't think we've crossed the finish line yet. If we had a liability legislation at the Indian end that was clean and that met all the requirements of the CSC, which is the Convention on Supplementary Compensation, then I would have declared without any hesitation that, we had won the race. But unfortunately, because of the complexities of Indian politics and because the Singh government does not enjoy the kind of majority that he would like and we would probably have liked to see, we've got legislation that has become very complicated. Now, this legislation, as it stands today, in my judgment, is not CSE compliant. And because it's not CSE compliant, it imposes, very significant penalties on private sector participation in India's nuclear energy program. And this is not simply the American private sector that's penalized, but the Indian public sector as well. And so I think the big challenge that both countries have is to now find workarounds that allow the private sectors in both countries and internationally to play the role that the Prime Minister would like to see the private sector play. And so I think this is unfortunately still unfinished business. Now, I'm optimistic that in the next few months we will find a solution to this problem. Unfortunately, it will not take the form of legislation because the government simply does not have the requisite majority in Parliament to amend the law. But I think we may be able to find solutions either through bureaucratic means or through regulation. And both sides are having a very active conversation on this issue right now. So I'm optimistic that we will finally be able to have a nice ending and tie the bow and then get out of the way and leave, the private sector in both countries to go about doing their business.